Which hobbies that people do screams rich people. In Sweden, it's tennis. Even though tennis isn't super expensive, that's where all the millionaires, their kids are. A big part of that is the opportunity to play. You need a large plot of land for 2 to 4 people to play tennis, which means courts are expensive. Compare that to something like basketball where you can play at home with a $100 hoop, or 10 people can play on a public court that is similar in size to a tennis court. So for every 10 people that can play basketball on a public court, 2 to 4 people can play tennis. It takes dedicated money to establish tennis courts, and only richer areas are going to build them. For some reason here in Brazil there's a lot of rich people playing as well. And in my city I would say half of the professors are actually poor, teaching rich entitled kids. My teacher right now is on a comfortable position where he basically shoo weird people off his court, and I love training there. I'm no rich person, but I feel I'm out of place sometimes. In terms of image, I can see where you are coming from, but in reality, it's more of a middle-class sport. The equipment can cost a bit, but nothing ridiculous, at least in Australia, or more specifically Melbourne. Court availability isn't that hard either. Joining a club isn't any more expensive than joining any other sports club. There are many clubs and courts dotted around the city. In my area specifically, there are at least 3-4 clubs within a 10 minutes drive of my house. The courts at one of the local clubs is almost always empty. At least there is usually no one there when I rock up. The one thing I do wonder is how much of this perception is warped by the fact that I grew up in Melbourne, which is home to the Australian Open, one of the 4 Grand Slams, hence having a greater tennis culture when compared to many parts of the W. In Denmark, tennis is elite only most places. Actual middle class play badminton. Good example is Lars Ulrich, who started Metallica. His dad was a pro tennis player from the 1950s who then moved to Cali in the 1970s with Lars in tow, and the reason Lars and James had a place to play music at first and just have access to space and gear was Lars's dad's house, where they had a separate yoga room they used to jam at first in 1981. Then they later moved to jam with Ron McGovern in 1980 to IARC, but Lars's initial money made things a lot easier for them. In Colombia, that's basically any sport that isn't football. Soccer for the Usians. Football is the most accessible sport to anybody, as a ball is able to be found everywhere and any park or street can become a field. Maybe also basketball, cycling as in Tour de France and similar competitions. And in some regions baseball could be considered working class sport. Things like cross cycling, tennis, archery, gymnastics, and so on are for people who is well off, as the equipment and the schools are expensive. Those who are really rich and have foreign parents do winter sports, as there are 0 alpine resorts Colombia, and the little snow we have is disappearing due to global warming. Well, I've done that and I'm not rich. This post actually has balls because everyone chooses how to earn and, more importantly, how to spend their money. Some like F1 and save their money to travel to a race or 2 or more per year. Some people choose to buy a McMansion or fill a garage with a new car every other year. Some people collect wine. Jesus, let people be. This constant denigrating of rich people comes off as so petty and hateful. There's flying to a race and then flying to a race. I'll never forget the eye-opening part of when I went to the F1 race at Austin for the first time. We parked in the back lot up by turn 1, which happened to be by the helipad. We got to watch very fancy helicopters shuttling the wealthy people from their private jets at the nearby executive airport to the track helipad, where they got into a luxury SUV which shuttled them directly down into the paddock area, and they walked directly into the VIP area. My bro made the comment that one of the reasons the rich pay that much is so they don't have to be near common people like us. I'd been around regionally wealthy people before, but that was an endless stream of the wealthiest people from around the globe. We also snuck into the classic race car pits while we were there and talked to a guy who has an Audi Lemons race car built especially for him from the leftover parts from their winning teams, because their actual cars are in museums. We Googled and discovered he was a very wealthy executive and gentleman racer. I work for Porsche. Many clients have racetrack memberships where they garage their cars and have track days. $80-90K initiation fee, $10,000 annual fee for some memberships. My buddy has a house or membership to Thermal near Coachella. I've raced there a few times. They are on another level. I typically spend around $4,000 for brakes, tires, and fluids every 4 track days, which is not that bad, but buying a race-specific car like the Ariel Atom or a Rush Racing Works car is much more budget-friendly. A lot of beater BMs out there too, but they are always breaking down. Track days are typically 150 and are open to everyone, so I encourage anyone that likes racing to try it out. It's addicting and everyone is very friendly. My neighbor is a yachtsman who makes a middle-class living racing rich people's yachts. So, I would say hiring people to indulge your hobbies is about as 1% as one can get. Sailing is an interesting hobby. I've just started and was surprised how old everyone is. The answer, I'm told, is because everyone assumes it's really expensive, so nobody starts until they retire. The truth is you can actually get a basic yacht for as little as $5,000, mooring for around $500, and you can sail on someone else's yacht for free. Many people are looking for crew. It can be super expensive for sure, but it doesn't have to be. And it's fun. One of the founders of Microsoft has entire crews of people whose full-time career is looking for sunken ships. I think I was listening about it on This American Life or some other radio program like that. I mean, like their full-time job is to search for shipwrecks. Lots of specialized equipment. One of the founders of Microsoft has entire crews of people whose full-time they actually ended up providing a valuable service to the Navy. They have located many ships that were sunk in battle, and the Navy then shares the location with the families of the sailors who died on the ship. And the most fascinating part of it, the captain of the ship was like, "We have an audience of one. I'll spend weeks searching for some clues to a specific wreck, and I'll find some readings that are promising, and I send him the data we have and he just responds cool." That's their entire career. I'm glad someone said polo. I love polo. It's actually pretty approachable as a spectator to get into. In more rural areas, well-off players will often lend horses to poorer players, just so that there are enough people to be able to play. Plus, it's funny watching polo people tailgate. You get the whole range of trucks with BBQs, like at a football game, to BMWs with Yeti coolers giving out wine. Actually really enjoy attending polo games the few times I've gotten to go. Plus, the really hoity-toity people are up in the stands, and the fun people, rich or poor-ish, are down on the grass with folding chairs. I worked with a girl from India. It was a science-Y job, so I figured she was a standard STEM Indian immigrant who came from modest means and worked their way to the US. Then she mentioned her polo club, and how well her new horse was doing, and I realized she didn't actually need to work. She came from serious money, and the job was just because she liked the work and felt the need to appear normal. I live in a small Wyoming town. There is a polo club nearby. They have games that anyone can go to. I always wanted to, but just haven't gotten around to it. I would like to see an event where polo players and cowboys compete. Not sure how it would be structured, but it should take advantage of both skill sets while not giving one a distinct advantage. Cowboys can rope, jump off horses to tie cattle up, and ride bulls. Polo players, I don't know, swing a giant mallet at a ball? I think I can see it, cowboys out there roping that giant mallet and yanking it away from the polo players. This activity just never interested me. Like, even if I suddenly came into huge wealth, I can't see myself willingly seeking it out and would probably only do it to fit in at social events. Is it really that more fun than regular sports even poor people can play, like basketball or soccer? I also don't get the obsession rich people have with horses. For getting around, get a car, a bike, or a boat. For pets, get a dog or a cat. For a hobby, I'd rather grow plants like I do now. Outside of their limited utility, they're pretty pointless for something so expensive unless you treated them like an investment, like racehorses, in which case it sounds like it's the money and exclusivity that's the focal point of interest, not the horses themselves, which are one broken leg away from being completely worthless. I can see the appeal of the boats, the cars, the big houses, the designer clothes, the traveling, the exclusive parties, but horses are just so meh to me. I once promised my father to pick something up from Craigslist with him. I was hungover, wore socks and sandals, and had my pajama shirt on. On the way back, we saw people play polo. It was some kind of just for the lulz tournament where people were allowed to come and watch. I saw the Maharaja Singh of Jaipur fall from his horse at some point. One team leader's name was Isabella von Morgenstern van Morningstar. Behind us, there was a huge tent where Maseratis got sold. In New Zealand, as the rich started to emerge in the 90s, so did polo as a sport. I don't like it. It reeks of colonialism and reminds me of how our country developed a divide. Things like motor racing and yachting and horse racing were more accessible to an average person here than overseas. Wealthy people might own a horse stud, but your average middle manager or builder might have a small yacht or jet boat or share in a racehorse or race car. We were lucky that a lot of leisure activities were accessible. Summering. Only rich people will ask another person where they summer. There's a bit in Marvelous Mrs. Maisel where the title character, Midge Maisel, mentions she will be in the Cats to her working-class manager and won't be able to book any comedy gigs. Her manager was surprised to discover she'd be away for 2-3 months, not a week or so. Midge is surprised to discover someone wouldn't immediately understand what going to the Cats means. I'm an Aussie, so had to look up the context, but rich people would just flee New York City in the summer en masse to avoid the heat and the smell. If you were wealthy and Jewish, you'd likely be going to a resort in the Cats for months on end. A friend of ours got a wildly expensive cappuccino machine from his wife for Christmas. She didn't think there was room for it in their huge gourmet kitchen, so they had a whole coffee station with cabinets and drawers and a built-in mini fridge and marble countertops installed in the adjoining breakfast area. This was all because they got tired of driving to Starbucks twice a day. Oh, and they sent us home with an Xbox One the other night because they just bought whatever the new one is and had no use for it. Lol, nicest people, just wildly wealthy. Spending on good coffee machine will save you money in the long run. I bought Breville machine for $1,000 plus another $200 in accessories and about $35 a month on coffee beans. I drink 2 lattes a day, so let's say $4 per latte equals $8 a day. Multiply that by 365. That makes $2,920 a year on a coffee when going to coffee shop versus $1,200 upfront on machine that will last years, $400 yearly on good coffee beans. First year savings are $1,320 and every following year that you use your paid for machine saving are $2,520 since you just spend on coffee beans, and this is just for one person drinking coffee. So yeah, buying expensive coffee machine may sound wasteful, but in reality it's not if you appreciate a really good cup of coffee. This one doesn't seem like an unreasonable rich thing to do, honestly. It's not like consoles are on a yearly release cycle with incremental upgrades like phones are. The Xbox One was released in 2013 and a lot of games aren't being released for it anymore, or if they are, they're a compromised experience compared to the Xbox Series X, so anyone who's vaguely serious about gaming will want to buy a Series X anyways. And then, since the Series X can play all Xbox One games natively, there's no reason for you to keep the Xbox One. Sure, you could sell it, but going through so much hassle just to get $100 for it on eBay may not be worth it to you as much as just gifting it to a friend and making them happy. I'm decidedly middle class, and I wouldn't even dream of being able to do most of the things in this thread, but if I had an Xbox One and bought a Series X, I'd rather give the one away than sell it. That's how my Bill got a nice big flat screen TV when those things were still ridiculously pricey. A rich woman down the road where he lived got a new living room wall shelving unit, and she asked my Bill if he could set it up for her. He did the gardening for them. So he did. But the space reserved for the TV in the new wall unit was too small for the flat screen they had. This was when CRTs were still sold, and CRTs were usually much smaller. He asked her what to do about this. She called a local shop, asked him for the dimensions of the available space, and ordered a new, fitting flat screen to be delivered now. And then she asked my Bill if he wanted to take the old one as a bonus on top of the pay. I know a lady like this. My son just got a brand new iPad mini 6, 256 gigabytes, with the Apple Pencil, maybe a couple of months old, and my ex got a new purse and bone-conducting headset and opened, still in box last weekend because she was getting new ones. Or just tired of those. She called me up last week and brought the stuff by my house so I could deliver it when I got my son last Friday. Not the first time something like this has happened. Sweetest lady in the world, also just wealthy in a way my 70K year life doesn't understand. As a person who grew up dirt broke and secondhand everything, including game systems, smoke covered, replacing random parts, etc., that makes me short circuit into silence. I'd probably donate it, even if it functions fully. Tired of driving to Starbucks every day. While I trust your opinion on the super kind part, that whole situation, from walking in the house just to say hello, would make me uncomfortable with no insult to them. I don't think I could take it from them because they had no use for it anymore. $40,000 for the espresso machine alone. I'm not sure I could validate this. If you don't go to top end immediately, honestly investing in espresso pays off shockingly quickly. You can get a decent older machine or a mediocre cheap machine and the equipment to start brewing, plus good beans, and you'll be in for about $200 USD if you hunt well enough for good deals. Spend some time getting to know your machine and I'll guarantee you'll make better coffee than Starbucks, but if you're getting really good beans and at making espresso better than a lot of local cafes, that $200 is paid off shockingly quick if you spend $7 on a coffee elsewhere. That's about 29 days worth of a single $7 coffee a day. If you go more regularly, then it pays off even faster. I pay $17 for a single bag of whole beans and that lasts me for about 57 gram shots. It's some work to get right, but it's been very rewarding and shockingly money-friendly. On a much less grand scale, I want to do this for a fountain soda station. My wife and I don't drink coffee. Diet caffeinated sodas are our coffee. However, my wife is a fountain Diet Coke snob and insists on that unless it is just absolutely not available. So nearly every morning one of us runs out and gets fountain Diet Cokes like other folks get coffee. I suspect, however, that she values the trip and effort as much as that fountain itself, so even if I got her one, we would still end up going out and getting them occasionally. First world problems. Rich people, am I right? My aunt's husband owns high-rise hotels in Manhattan. He pays thousands a year for a parking space in the Port Authority bus terminal to park his Bentley. His house is literally next door to Thomas Edison's mansion in the oldest gated community in America. Their house has an intercom system with phones in every room because their kids couldn't hear them across the house. It's also a clearly unhappy marriage. My aunt is obviously only with him for his money. I don't go there anymore, too much yelling. We had a meet and greet with a new executive at my company and she told us one of her hobbies is investing in real estate. The frustrating thing about having money makes money is that if you have the money to do this, it's a great financial decision. For a small-scale example, I dated a woman in college who had a rather wealthy mother. Instead of renting a place to live for her daughter, she just bought an apartment close to campus and then sold it when my ex graduated. Because the rent she charged my ex's roommate covered both upkeep and the mortgage, she not only broke even, but probably turned a profit, while the rest of us were in the negative for paying rent even though we didn't have as much money. If I had the money to do that, I'd invest in real estate as a hobby too. A friend of mine once rented a large one-bedroom apartment in London in a very wealthy apartment block, worth over $2 million. It was sold to an investor, so they had to move out. As a courtesy, they were involved in some email conversations with the new owner, and they were unbelievably thick, like they did not understand that common bed sizes exist, king, queen, double. They would email about other stuff saying the information you gave me cannot be right because I have been searching all day and cannot find anything that is compatible. And my friend would spend 30 seconds Googling and say, here is 20 items that match the information I gave. An investor buying $2 million plus apartments with a sub-high school education. But to be honest, it makes sense to treat this as a hobby. The amount of research and labor you can throw into flipping real estate could make it a second job, and if you factor in your labor cost, I'd assume at least 100H for an executive, it's not really profitable. But could be fun to buy some barely standing house, renovate it to your liking, and sell for profit. I could totally see it to be a hobby just as trading stocks and researching companies as opposed to buying index fund and holding. My granddad belonged in a country club. My extremely affluent uncle enjoys building and flying his own aircraft as a hobby. There appear to be kits, but he has also acquired and fixed small two-seater planes that have crashed. Friend of a friend is stupid rich, emphasis on stupid. Guy famously decided to learn to fly one day, so he bought a new plane, and not a cheap one. Apparently, he got it into his head that the plane would be better with a new wiring system, so he had it rewired to the tune of an extra 60 grand or more. Then he started the process to get his pilot's license and found out that he's color blind. I think it was, so he just gave up the idea and sold the plane at a huge loss. Didn't blink an eye. I went to my auntie's 70th birthday. She's a hobbyist pilot and longtime member of an aviation club. My partner and I were talking to one of the guys there, and he asked, "Did you guys ever get into flying?" To which we obviously replied with no. He seemed genuinely surprised and then asked, "Oh, did your parents just not let you?" The obscene cost of flying, owning, renting planes never even entered his mind. The only reason he could see for not flying planes as a child was a lack of interest. Pretty mind-blowing, to be honest. I used to work catering at thoroughbred horse auctions. I live in KY, so these people are completely bonkers for horses. Saw a few go for over 12 mil. I actually saw a woman walk up to one while they were grooming it, drop to her knees, and weep at its beauty. Horse people are the absolute weirdest. They live and breathe these animals, and it's completely insane. Unrelated, but funny, that woman got kicked pulling that same move a week later. She's fine, but there were about 1,000,000 signs the next day saying basically these are massive animals. And if you wander around and find out, it's not on us. That one cracked me up. You obviously need a level of risk tolerance, high enough income, and interest in real estate, but I know several software engineers and an insurance director who do this exact thing. Something that probably isn't the first to people's minds, but aquariums. Good God, are aquariums all about upfront investments in time, money, and space, and that still doesn't 100% safeguard things from going catastrophic, to which then the typical solution is an even more absurd dedication of time, money, and space to remedy said problem. They're gorgeous and can absolutely be a source of serenity for a room, but honestly, that serenity is only going to be felt by those who didn't have to put the work, planning, and money into it. I'd honestly say keeping a standard 20-gallon fish tank would be comparable to keeping a small parrot, at least in terms of effort and knowledge required, and the needs go up exponentially from there. Collecting Golden Age or Silver Age comics. When I started collecting myself in the mid to late 80s, there were only a handful of expensive books, mostly DC titles. A stickler for condition would only buy it if it was near mint or better condition. At one point, my collection consisted of Dartville, One Street Punisher Appearance X-Men #1, plus giant-sized #1, issues 94 to about 230-ish, with my last major purchase being Fantastic Four #1, which at the time was valued at approx $1,200 in 1992, paid like $1,100. Since this would easily have been a 9.0 or better graded book, the value today would be over $250,000. Plus quite a few other books that at the time were only worth between $75,500, many are worth tens of thousands or more now. Wound up selling my collection mid-90s, and although I made a profit, there is no way I could afford to be collecting on that level anymore. Had I waited and sold my copies today, I could afford to retire by selling under 100 of my books that were worth the most today. My collection when sold consisted of nearly 8,000 books. I don't know if this is technically the answer you were looking for, but just about an hour ago I saw an ad for a farmer's market in a part of town that is basically just a rich people's shopping district, and it's Thursday at 8:11 a.m. Nothing screams this is only for people with money than being scheduled for the time when most people work. And the fact that it had tons of white ladies commenting ready to go after brunch solidified that.